Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of the Wednesday weekly late night party with myself, Zod Ryder, and my good friend Robert Meyer Burnett. And we are here tonight out of respect to our good friend who is no longer with us, Mikey Sutton. And I say good. I put good friend before the words co-host or streaming partner or whatever you want to call it, because Mikey truly was a friend. He was a true friend to me. He was a friend to Robert. He was most likely a friend to all of you who are in the chat right now. And Mikey's death has affected us all in profoundly different and unique ways, as well as just blindsiding all of us and being completely still in shock by it all after just finding out about it over the weekend. Rob, welcome back, man.
Like you were just saying, it, I never expected this. I mean, Mikey was so full of life, and like I knew him, before the online geek punditry. I remember reading his byline in the Tower Records magazine, Pulse. They had a monthly music magazine that, and I know he wrote for that, and obviously I've been following his scoops and his writing about Marvel and comic book movies for years, and I was a fan of his. And I remember we met recently, like within the last 2 years, and I met face to face, and it was very funny because when I first met him, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm a huge fan of yours," and he's like, "You know who I am?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, and I told him, because whenever like we would get together, we would always talk on this show. We'd end up talking about music or new wave bands, and I didn't realize he'd produced new wave acts from Manila that he brought to America. And I didn't realize how extensive his writing career was, and like you were just saying, he just had some great success. He's just told me he signed a deal to write 4 novels, and he was working on the novels, and Dreamwalkers being made as a TV series. And it just seems so. What's so strange to me about, I mean, I know it's just life and it happens every single day, but it's very weird when it's somebody that is young. I mean, Mikey was just a little bit younger than me.
Hey, he was 55.
Yeah. And I mean, I know he had a stroke before, but he powered through it, and he was back, and he was out working and busting his ass, and he was so full of life. He was so much fun to talk to. And the real sad thing is, whenever somebody I know like this passes away, this is going to seem, I always think of Star Trek 3, and it's when Sarek goes to Kirk's apartment in San Francisco, and he's trying to figure out what happened, and Kirk doesn't know about his Katra yet. And I hear Mark Leonard's voice saying, well, then everything he knew, everything he was, is gone. And I've always heard that whenever I lose somebody that I know, I think of those words, because everything he did know so much. I mean, he had an encyclopedic knowledge of all of this stuff. And it's always such a shame that not only will we never speak to him again, but all of that knowledge that he had acquired through years of fandom and going to shows and all this stuff, and the producing he'd done and bringing acts from the Philippines to America, all of those experiences. That's the thing that always I can never quite reconcile, is that I hope in our future with AI or whatever, people's experiences and all that knowledge can be downloaded, and so other generations, I mean, could benefit from all the things that he knew.
Yeah.
And
the simulation project,
yeah.
the ancestral simulation project. I look at Mikey and I think about how much, you mentioned, him being full of life. I mean,
Yeah.
I always wondered, like, when does Mikey sleep? When does
Right.
Mikey have a moment to just bask in what he's doing? When does he have a moment to just stop and think of all of the positive things he's accomplishing? This was a man on fire, like with a vision, who just was never going to let anything bring him down. He was determined to do all these things, and it's an inspiration to see the way everything was starting to transpire and everything was beginning to formulate. And for me, I take it so personally and consider it so beautiful the way that Mikey wanted to include all of his friends and family into everything that he did.
I mean, that was, by the way, I haven't been drinking over the last couple months, but figured special occasion, little Pinot Noir. I raised my glass. I'm not going to pour it out, but I'm going to raise it because I'm going to drink it. This is for Mikey. And, you know, all the things that, the funny thing about him to me was we didn't know each other that well, but he wanted to include me in all these things. And, you know, I really liked these shows we were doing. They would, I mean, we'd get through 2 or 3 hours and lickety split. You know, it was amazing. So I didn't even drink. Here's to Mikey.
To Mikey. I couldn't agree more with the way that our shows kind of, when I look at, you know, this show in particular that we did, it was never, you know, particularly limited to anything. It was just whatever we wanted to talk about.
It was Wednesday night party.
It was a party, and it was a free for all, and it was whatever we needed to talk about or felt, anything we felt. And Mikey always brought his experiences, his love for various things, his just the camaraderie that, you know, it felt like, I don't know, Rob. I mean, I felt like we were, the three of us, when we were doing the show, it was like we were childhood friends.
Yeah, well, and that was the funny thing.
It's crazy to me.
But he and we had so much in common because, you know, especially as children of the 80s, I have to tell you, like
the whole Seattle thing too.
Yeah, and he'd been in Seattle, and we'd seen bands, and we'd been to the same places, and it's really interesting because I don't know many people who have, I mean, people either like movies or they like TV shows, video games, whatever, but I haven't met many people that love, you know, pop music and all of these things, the whole spectrum of them. And I think that was a product of growing up in the 80s. You know, it's so, I was thinking about this today. So this came out this week. Weird Science on 4K, and you know, John Hughes directed this, obviously, and I mean, I forgot Robert Downey Jr. is in it, but Vernon Wells is in it. Wes from The Road Warrior, who I had on my channel earlier tonight. I'd forgotten that too. But the thing about John Hughes movies was his soundtracks were almost as important as the movies themselves. And he had a lot of new wave bands, a lot of bands from Europe and things. And so to be a movie fan in the 80s was also to be a pop music fan, because there was so much crossover. You know, you would have big bands and popular songs, or movies would popularize songs. You know, when they would use Berlin, like I was a huge Berlin fan. And then when Berlin showed up in Top Gun, I'm like, well, of course they did, you know? And so Mikey had this vast knowledge of pop music too. So when we get to talking, it was always nice to hear, because he knew so much about music, and he knew more about music than I did. And so I didn't write for music journals or anything, but he did. And it was such a nice, time to get to know him and to realize we had so much in common, because it's funny because in the geek space and in this whole movie pundit space, most of the people in it are younger than me. So it's hard to sometimes find, like today, Duran Duran dropped a new song off they made a Halloween album, and it's called Dance Macabre. And Stephen King had a book once called Dance Macabre in the early 80s, a nonfiction book. And the first thing, it was so funny. I was like, oh, I'm so excited to talk to Mikey about the new Duran Duran record, that they made a Halloween album. And then I was like, oh, I can't do that.
This would have been right up his alley. This would have been something he would have wanted to talk about with us, because we've done that on the show. Like,
I know
it's, oh my God.
And when I got home tonight, there's a guy, I forget his name, but he's been putting out old albums in remixed. He's an incredible mixer, Dolby Atmos, and like they just put out Dark Side of the Moon, and somebody sent me a link that this new Duran Duran record is coming out mixed in Dolby Atmos. And I'm like, oh man. So I was sitting in my driver and I'm like, click, because if you don't buy these albums quickly, they sell out immediately. And when I was there and I was thinking maybe Mikey was smiling down on me, there's also Prince's album Diamonds and Pearls that's up remixed in Dolby Atmos. So I'm like, oh, and click. And that was those purchases are dedicated to Mikey Sutton.
Yeah, he would be looking at it, and it's so funny. I had a few friends over these last couple of days that we've been kind of just like hanging out, drinking, reminiscing about Mikey, kind of having our own form of like a Viking funeral for Mikey sort of thing. And it's like every time we would laugh or joke or bring up something that we knew Mikey, would be right there with us. I swear we could almost hear Mikey laughing.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one thing that always stood out with Mikey on this show. He loved to laugh. He was always enjoying himself, having the greatest time in the world. It was always one of those things. And he always told me, Rob, how much he loved doing this show. And he was always so grateful and thankful that, the three of us could stream together. And he just was, and he had said at one point that he was enjoying being a streamer on YouTube more than doing the writing, more than all the other crazy stuff he was doing. He just loved it because he loved being around people who were passionate about these things the way that he was. And he considered us all family, and he treated us all with so much love and respect. It's hard to, it's hard, you rarely meet people, Rob, like, as you were pointing out, where you can feel that you have that instant chemistry, and that they're the genuine article, and they don't let you down. And Mikey was one of those people. Like, he was one of a kind, and when he had something to say, you knew where it was coming from, and it was always coming from his heart, and he was always having a good time. It's amazing to me. I mean, I feel like I just talked to him a couple days ago. It's so hard to like.
Yeah, I mean, me too. And what's interesting is there's so much snarky vitriol in our YouTube space.
Yes,
and it's I participate in it, especially when it's about Star Trek or something. But I've really grown tired of it all. And at least on my own channel, it was I try, other than when I talk about Star Trek, I try and keep it upbeat, light, and positive. But this Wednesday night show was always positive. It was always, we were talking about what we love. And even if we were talking about something that we didn't love, it wasn't like, fuck that person or whatever. It was always light and fun. And, we put smiles on each other's faces. And I'm going to miss that because, he, like you said, he would always laugh, and you felt like you were just enjoying a fun time with your buddies. And
always, yeah.
And I'm gonna miss him, because you and I have been streaming now for what, a decade?
Yeah, we've known each other for like a decade, over a decade now, because it's gonna be, I know, my God, it has been that long. It's insane.
It's been that long. Yeah, and
we go back.
We do, way before I was on YouTube.
Yeah. Me either. I wasn't even thinking about YouTube. Like me, it was all like internet radio, and I was learning all the ins and outs of running this like broadcasting software and doing all that crazy stuff. And I just, I was just happy to know the awesome director of Free Enterprise. I had no at the time, I had no idea that, you and I would become such good friends. And then as time went on, it's like it almost like occurred. I guess it must have just occurred to you, because I remind people of this all the time. And I said this to Mikey a bunch of times too. I said, well, Mikey, it was Rob's idea that we do this. Rob was the one that said, let's do this every week. Like, it just sort of.
Well, I think it's just because the thing is, my tendency, I've loved all the stuff I've loved. I've loved it for my whole life.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's kind of a blessing and a curse in that, my mom said to me once, why is it you like everything why do you still like everything you liked when you were 8 years old? You know, and my mom doesn't understand it. Like when I tell her about Starship models, like I told her I'm getting this Partworks kit of this 4-foot Millennium Falcon, and I said to her, I was explaining to her that I'm getting all these modification parts before I start building it, so I can make it more accurate to A New Hope, and she was like, wait, you're buying parts for a model that aren't in the model? And I was trying to explain to her, like, well, yeah. And she goes, what, why are you made Starship Enterprise models when you were 5? It's a quarter of or half a century later, and you're still, why are you doing this? And she's like, aren't you going to be ever done with it? Like, why do you need another Millennium Falcon? I mean, I've got one right over there, to be honest, but the one I'm building is bigger. And it's like, and Mikey was the same way.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just funny because to like this, it's a lifelong thing. And I don't think it, you know, fandom, and I really think that Star Wars was the fulcrum. It was sort of that point in time. Nothing had happened. There was no fandom that existed. I mean, Star Trek was a fandom, but it was niche. Star Wars was a fandom that was for everybody, and the whole world became a Star Wars fan. And it really opened the floodgates to science fiction, fantasy, and horror going into the mainstream. Yeah. I mean, Star Wars, Alien followed 2 years later, The Black Hole, Star Trek the Motion Picture, Superman the movie was a year after Star Wars. And Mikey and I were just part of that. We were right there at ground zero when this thing happened. And
you guys both talked about your very first experiences when you seeing the original Star Wars. And every time Mikey, I'd heard Mikey tell that story a few times, and every time Mikey tells that story, it feels to me, it always felt to me like the first time he was telling it. I never got tired of it because of his enthusiasm and that feeling that we can all relate to from having seen Star Wars for the first time, you know, and the gleam of like, wow, this new and exciting thing, you know, and loving it our whole lives. I mean, it's like he just exhibited that. Like the inner 8-year-old in Mikey always came out. Like he always could bring out the kid in him on all this stuff. And it was just an infectiously beautiful thing to see. I want to read this one message here really quick from Sil Abdul, my good friend Sil Abdul, one of my best friends ever. Shout out to Zod and Robert Meyer Burnett. One of my favorite streams on my channel was when Mikey finally met Rob for the first time.
Yeah, I have vivid memories of that. And, you know, that was, I wonder how, was that a year ago? Is it 2 years ago? I don't know how long ago
I want to say it was probably about 2 years ago now.
Yeah, I think, yeah, maybe it was. Yeah.
Because then when we started and then it just seemed like it was, I don't know. I keep thinking about how the idea was so perfect to come and have, you know, us finally do some kind of a stream and try to nail it down to where it would be weekly and we could have, and it just, and the amount of topics that we were able to just come up with and just fly off the cuff from whatever we wanted. And I remember when Mikey said about the plans that he had for you, Robert, the movie that he wanted you to direct that took place in Seattle during the 1990s. And I reminded Mikey, I did a super chat on Sil Abdul's stream because he was talking about it on one of the more recent Sil streams that they did, and I had put out a super chat, Rob, and in the super chat I said 3 words. I said Crescent City Blues, and after that in parentheses I wrote, if you know, you know.
That was crazy, by the way. That was so much fun.
And Mikey remembered it instantly. He knew exactly what I was talking about. Like it dinged right away. He mentioned it right on the show about how we were sitting there messing around with ChatGPT, coming up with all that stuff, and you were typing it out, and we were just kind of, you know,
howling.
It was, oh my God, it was ridiculous. It was so great. It was
so good.
So great.
But you know, it's such a funny thing because it really, here's the thing that I has really hit me. I mean, I've had a lot of people pass away. I've had a lot of friends pass away, probably more than most people when I was younger. And uh, I had another experience where I was married, and I had a beautiful sister-in-law who was my assistant, and we were working. It was the day that we got awarded the job of Superman Returns, and she went with her husband to go to dinner at 6 o'clock. And I left soon after because then we were going to go meet them at Lola's for a drink or something. And so I went home and I stopped and I bought a bottle of Cristal, like some $150 bottle of champagne for my wife and I to drink. And we were drinking the champagne. It was like 7:30. So it'd been 90 minutes since I'd last seen my sister-in-law and my assistant. We get this phone call that there had been an accident. And she'd been killed in a traffic accident. And what was so hard to wrap my head around was 90 minutes before, this beautiful, vibrant, blonde girl that worked for me, who was my sister-in-law, we just got awarded Superman Returns to go spend a year in Australia making that documentary. And 90 minutes later, she was gone. Like she no longer existed. And it was something it was very difficult to wrap my head around that. And I hadn't felt that way. And this happened back in 2004, September of 2004. So it'd been almost 20 years. And reading on Facebook that Mikey had passed away, all those feelings flooded back. Like, well, it can't really be gone because we haven't had a conversation yet. Like, you figure that you're going to be able to say goodbye to somebody. Like, they're not just going to be gone, because the last time you talk to somebody, they're like, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. You don't, if somebody's not terminally ill and they don't have a slow slide into oblivion, if they're just like, hey, I'm going to go to dinner. I'll see you guys later. Okay. And then that's it. And the last time we talked to Mikey was on this show. And I know I had a few email exchanges with him. And then it's like we should, I know that this is irrational to say, but I always feel like, well, don't we get one more conversation?
Yeah.
Can't we say goodbye?
I know it's one of those things where like you kind of, everything is just left. So you're just left hanging. It's the most bizarre thing ever. And I like the example you gave about, the terminal decline into the abyss. Essentially, you expect something like that to be long and drawn out, like everybody deserves like some epic send-off. And you never, nobody ever, not these kinds of things that happen so suddenly and quickly don't ever, leave you with any kind of feeling but like whiplash, like, oh my God, here we are. It's all just going to be a flood of emotions now because it's all emptiness. And we had some of our best conversations, I think, you and I together. When we were with Mikey, some of our best conversations together always happened either prior to the show or after the show.
Yeah. And but I will say, not to be, I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer. The flip side to this is that Mikey, he'd survived a stroke 5 years before.
Right.
He didn't have to go on some long slide into oblivion.
No.
Like, he didn't get some terminal cancer and watch it eat up his body. And he wasn't in a bed surrounded by his friends when he slipped off in the mortal coil. He probably hit him and he didn't even know what happened. So he probably didn't feel any pain, and it happened very quickly. So that's merciful, and he's just gone. And, it's funny because I thought about, like, I want to live as long as I can.
Yeah.
We all do. Yeah. And even if, like, I don't want to live if I'm infirm, like if I can't walk and I can't, if I'm kind of a vegetable, I don't want to, that's no way to live. I want to be able to continue. My grandfather, the same thing kind of happened to him. He lived to be 97 years old, and he was out walking and he went clothes shopping. He still drove.
Wow.
97. And he went very, very quickly overnight. And, I remember going out to visit him. I saw him in the hospital. He didn't even know what was wrong. He didn't even know that he was going to die. I knew he was going to die, but he didn't know, because it was a heart thing, and they couldn't operate on him because he was 97. They wouldn't put him under general anesthesia. I'm like, but he's hard. The guy worked out every day. If there's any 97-year-old that can survive, to be him. They can't do it. The actual hospital's like, there's no way. We're not going to take that risk, and we're not going to spend the money. I think he would have survived, but they couldn't do it. And I understand. But it was the weirdest thing. After visiting hours, I knew that my grandfather would not be alive within 24 to 36 hours because there was a tear in his heart, and oxygenated and unoxygenated blood were mixing together. And eventually his brain would be oxygen starved. And I'll tell you that if I haven't told you this or you haven't heard the story, dude, this is the craziest shit I've ever seen in my life. This is truly the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I go back to the hospital in the morning, and they've told me, my mom they're sedating him. They're giving him pain medication. So I walk into my grandfather's hospital room, and doesn't acknowledge me coming in. And he's sitting up and he's having a conversation with his best friend, Jack Friedlander, that I could figure out what they're. And my grandfather's just as if Jack Friedlander was in the room. Like he was looking at him, and like my grandfather was watching like Jack pace. Jack had been dead for 20 years. And I'm sitting there watching this. And then he left and other people came in. Other friends of my grandfather's came in the room. And my grandfather, for 3 hours, I watched my grandfather talk to people that I knew because I'd known them growing up. And then after 3 hours, right almost at noon, my grandfather stopped talking and he leaned back. He turned and he looked right at me and he put his hand out to me like this. And I took his hand in my hand and he kind of smiled at me. He leaned back and flatlined.
Wow.
It was wild. And the funny thing about it was, I know the rational person in me knows that his brain was starved, but we don't know anything about consciousness.
No.
He might have been accessing memories, that were so vivid, and whatever was going on in his brain, it was a slow. He had 3 hours of which he was accessing his memories, and he was talking and gesticulating as if nothing was happening. And then when it was over, he knew it was over. Like he stopped doing, he kind of settled back. And then suddenly he knew I was there. He didn't say anything to me. He just put his hand out and I took his hand and leaned back. And it was crazy because it was like in a movie. You hear that, like, it was funny because it wasn't as loud as it was in a movie, but you would hear, I just heard the beep. And then the nurses came in and he was still holding my hand.
Wow, that's
great. And so, who knows? Consciousness is an amazing thing. But I'd like to think that, Mikey he knew something happened, and then wherever he was probably in he opened his eyes and he was in some great new wave concert in 1986. And with an incredible lineup, and he'd be like,
"Oh yeah,
I wonder why wait, where was I?" And he wouldn't even, I guess I'm here now. Yeah. All right. Who's the next man?
He had a thing, 1986. We constantly mentioned 1986 on the show. It was quite a time. And Sil Abdul here says, and the whole purpose and the whole point, donate to the GoFundMe for Mikey's family. Definitely, for sure. The link is in the description and it is attached to the chat.
That was Mikey.
Robert is back.
He knew that was Mikey. He just wanted us to know that he's here.
He wanted us to know he's here. Yeah. He's I dreamt about him last night. I've been talking to everybody and connecting with everybody on Mikey. I dreamt about him last night in the dream. I'm walking down this road with Mikey and he's walking with me and we're talking. I don't know what we're talking about. I can't make it out, but I do remember the dream. We were talking, we were walking together, and then all I remember is hearing like an almost militant voice. It was like something out of Pink Floyd's The Wall, and it was like a militant voice with like a British accent, and the guy was like, Mikey. and I don't, and that's all I could. That's all I remember from the dream. But it was so vivid, and I woke up this morning thinking, "Wow, what was that? Like what kind of dream was that?" And I'm like, it's Mikey. It's Mikey messing with me. That's what it is. It's Mikey messing with me because it was just weird. I don't know. I let's see. Retro Nerd Girl says he was such a legend. I love seeing him on this show with you guys. Well, thank you, Retro Nerd Girl. Yeah, it was just an honor and a privilege to be able to do this show. I mean, I'm happy whenever I got to hang out with Mikey and Rob. And still answers here, Robert, that it was April of 2021 that you
Wow.
got that you
So
that
was
you
this
that you were on his stream and you met Mikey for the first time.
more than 2 years ago? Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just crazy.
Let's see. Mikey was an 80s encyclopedia. After your streams, I would go on YouTube and listen to all the music that he mentioned and reminisce. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I would do that
really
too.
knew.
Music and movies. Like we would talk about so much music and movies on this show that I would go back, and if there was a movie that I hadn't seen in a while and you guys mentioned it, I would go back and find it and watch it again, or at least look it up or research it a little more. And what I loved about that was hell. Even the adult movie conversations were fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I mean, there was always so much that we talked about on these shows that, if you were at all interested in any of that stuff, this was the stream to watch. And even though, it was a short-lived set of streams, it was still a very, very wonderful experience. Let's see. Yeah, right before they had started their Rogues Gallery thing.
Mm.
Mikey and Sil Rogues Gallery is one of their biggest streams. El Necron says Mikey made you feel like a teenager again. He was definitely a guy I would have gotten into trouble with. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. But it would be fun. It would be fun trouble.
It would be fun. And it's Sin Havoc says, I remember when Mikey talked about doing a podcast with Zod Ryder and Robert Meyer Burnett. I said, this will be legendary. Yeah. I'm still, what? It's the thing. I was, I'm so shocked by everything that has happened aside from, not just the, just the whole relationship and the friendship that I've developed with Mikey personally over the years, but the idea of how everything with Mikey was so organic with everybody he knew. Like you said, Rob, when you met him for the first time on Sil's stream, and then, coming together and doing to getting to a point of actually doing a weekly live stream, with Mikey and with me, and then having Mikey be so much, like I said, like a childhood friend. Like there was almost no continuity loss whatsoever. It's as though we've all known each other forever. So this is just natural conversation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it was great. I mean, and you know what the funny thing is too? It's interesting because you know how sometimes you meet people, and if you guys both know the same kinds of things, people sometimes get in that competitive, oh, who knows more than the other guy? There was none of that with Mikey. Like we would share our enthusiasm and love. I mean, and he knew more than I did, but I loved, like we'd talk about bands, and he would always throw out these asides, these stories about these bands, or a story about a concert, or a story about something that happened that I didn't know. So it was like, oh, wow, dude, that's really cool. I didn't know. And I love that about him. I love that he knew, like he augmented information that I had. And I've never considered anybody that knows more than I do as a threat. I've always thought of that's somebody I can learn from. I'm not competitive at all. And I loved when he would tell me his stories, because he had such knowledge when it came to music of the 80s, because we were both children of that era. And I wish I could have done a stream with him about just music, and I never did. So,
but you probably didn't know that was an idea that he had. That was something that he wanted to do with you. He wanted to do a music stream with you, and that's something you guys probably could have done, at some point, because it was another idea. And at that point, Mikey was pretty much a full-time YouTuber at that point.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he was streaming this with Still. He was streaming with us. He was streaming with, he was doing Night Shift with Skywalker the Jedi 5 nights a week. He was doing, streaming with different people over here, different people over there. He did a stream, Pandora's Box with Al Necron, which was about, a bunch of what's like 80s stuff, 80s horror, 80s music, 80s horror, 80s type of stuff. And I always looked at it like, man, Mikey can stream with anybody, and he will be so welcoming, so opening, and just giving towards everybody. He was always willing to give so much of himself to everybody, and never made anybody feel out of place or feel bad or feel nervous around him. Like once you knew Mikey, and you got to know him, it was like you've known him your whole life.
Yeah.
And so hashtag Mikeyverse, hashtag Dreamwalker.
Yeah,
exactly. Like,
I mean, here he'd sold a comic book that was the dream. I tried selling my comic book $1 million for a long time, and I never was able to get the traction. And he did it, man. He did it, and it was incredible. And yet he's not going to be here to achieve that success.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I mean, we will be.
Yeah, his legacy will continue on through all of us. And I know this for a fact, because everybody is motivated and everybody wants to help that goal be achieved regardless of what's going on. And I think it's it's so important, like right now in the immediacy, for anybody that can, to donate to the GoFundMe for Mikey's family, because that right now is the most pressing thing. That's the most important thing. Mikey wasn't just a great human being with all of us, but he also was very loving and caring towards his family, and was taking care of his mother, who was sick, and doing all sorts of things, outside real life things that, none of us really, it was like you never knew, you would never know. And you and I were talking about this off air. You would never know the kind of things that Mikey was going through.
Right.
Because when Mikey would get on a show with you, he was all smiles and laughs and out there to talk about whatever. And, he never complained about anything. He was always positive.
I did like the fact that his mom would like call him when he was on live with people. I just love when his mom would talk to him. I just thought that was the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And he would kind of go away from the speaker a little bit.
Take care of his mom.
Take care of his mom, handle that situation. He'll say, and you'd hear his mom in the background a little bit. You couldn't understand what his mother was saying.
Right.
But you knew he understood. So he'd be like, hold on, I'll be right back. And he would kind of go off and deal with it, and then come back to the show with no issues. It would just be a seamless transition. And Mikey was always great at all of that. He could handle everything, and it was so amazing. And I always thought, if there was anybody in all of our group who had potential to live forever, it was Mikey, just because of his energy level, just because of the way that he was going and taking on all of these projects head on. I mean, imagine that, 4 novels, 2 movies, a TV show, comic books, practically being a full-time YouTuber. I mean, when did the guy sleep?
I don't know. I don't know. But you know what? I mean, at least he wasn't resting on his laurels. He got as much done as he could.
He did.
So
Yeah, absolutely. He accomplished so much. And the thing is, again, he brought so many people together. There's a lot of people who know each other now and who are great, great friends who wouldn't know each other at all if it wasn't for Mikey Sutton.
right.
I mean, I don't know. I like to say, with you and with when you met Mikey on with Sil, I always thought, yeah, that was the start of that. But then you'd already knew me, and then when we got together and we decided to do this, I'm like, that was magical. I still
Right.
can't believe that exists. I still can't believe that this show exists. It's like Mikey was all about making dreams come true. Mikey was always about dreams, dreams, dreams. Hence his Dreamwalker comics. And
Yeah.
and we know wherever he is, he's got to be up there doing beautiful things. And Sil says here, Mikey lived his years after his first stroke to the fullest, 100%.
100%. And I mean, that's the way to live. And he didn't allow anything that happened in his last stroke get him to stop him from doing the work. I mean, and the funny thing is as I've gotten older, you do start thinking about how much like especially in the entertainment business, so much of your time is wasted by other people. Like you wait on people. Like you've done the work, you give the work to somebody and you have to wait on them. And like, what are we waiting for? Like, if you don't want to do it, just call me and say, we don't want to do it. Like, why do I have to wait 3 or 4 weeks to hear back from you? Like, I can go make a movie. Like, I literally have the skills to go, I can go out and I can do any part of making a movie. I mean, albeit a low budget film. But if I need to go produce a movie, direct a movie, write a movie, produce a movie, direct a movie, and edit a movie and finish a movie and deliver a movie, I could do that myself. I mean, obviously I need a crew and all that, but I mean, I could implement it and make it happen. And you're waiting on people who can't do those things and they're just holding you up. And that's the real frustration with the entertainment business. But he had so much going on. I mean, he had, like you said, he had signed a deal for a 4-book series. He had Dreamwalker in pre-production. He was writing the comic book. Like he was creating all this stuff and people were waiting on him because he was doing all these things and he was getting it done.
He was getting it done. Absolutely. Lawlessness. Saddest part is when the last interaction with someone is not one where you tell the person that they mean the world to you. Always tell the people you care about that they matter. Much love, everyone. Absolutely.
100%.
Couldn't agree more. It's really some incredible stuff. Sil says, I'm glad on my last interaction with Mikey that I told him that what he does matters. That was the last stream we did together and I'm at peace. I told my brother Mikey how I really felt. Yeah. Yeah. And I, and there's a great point, Sil, that you made not too long ago where you basically you said straight up, Mikey knew he was loved. And that's 100% true. He knew, and because he projected that love onto all of us and to everybody, and now it's just you're seeing that outpouring of that, and it's like everybody that ever interacted with Mikey and is dealing with him, got to know him on a personal level. Nobody has anything but good things to say about him because he was that good of a person. He was good to all of us. He wanted everybody to succeed.
I'm going to miss reading on Facebook which one of his scoops actually came true.
Oh my God. Yeah. He was definitely
I'm like, told you.
Yeah. he every time. And I mean, every time you would shout him out, one of my favorite things about how you would do Mikey Sutton was you would always name drop Mikey or bring him up on John Campia's show, and you'd get these eye rolls or these bizarre looks from Campia, and it always struck me as funny. But every time you name dropped Mikey, it was like you were putting like
Well, it's funny because I dropped his name before I met him.
Yeah.
Before I knew him, and because I would read his stuff, and I'm like, and it got to the point where I would read his stuff and I would always wonder, like, but I read everything that he wrote. So it was like, Mikey Sutton said this or Mikey Sutton said that. And see, the thing about John is he doesn't, he's so busy with doing his own show. He doesn't read a lot, or he doesn't watch a lot of other YouTubers or follow journalists and stuff like that. But I do. I follow, and it was habitual. I mean, I've done that for literally decades. So if there was somebody who was following the beat, as it were, the superhero beat, like Mikey, I'd follow him, there's like Garth, who does Dark Horizons. I mean, there's sites that I bounce around to, like it's part of my morning routine. I go to like Deadline Hollywood and Hollywood Elsewhere, and then I'll go to the Drudge Report, which is more not my politics, but I want to see what are they doing. And then I'll go to the BBC, and then I'll go to CNN, and then I'll go to like read what Mikey was saying, or then I'll go to, I'll see if Star Wars Theory has a new video and see if he liked Ahsoka, or whatever. And all these people that it's such a weird thing, because Elizabeth, she calls it, I watch my clips in the morning. Like I'll get up and I make myself morning coffee, and I'm like, okay, I have to see what Dave Cullen said. Does the Critical Drinker have something out? Has Gary done something? And like, I just go through all these people. Or there's a woman out of Chicago named Impression Blend, who Mariana, who's one of my favorite YouTubers because she covers books. She reads a lot of books, and so and plus I think she's Ukrainian or Russian. She's hot, but she's also very smart. And so, I go to all these people, and Mikey was one of those people. And to like not have somebody not there anymore is you become acutely aware of it. Like, oh
yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. This just the, the loss of your friend on a profound level. And as well as, the daily content that you consume, because it's like we're all in the same circles and we're all connected, and it's all just so, it's like we're one big organic machine, and just some parts are more acute than others, and then there's the whole concept of Campy is in his own little world. He's not focused on anybody. So it's eye rolling to him when you bring up somebody like Mikey. But I always got a kick out of that. Every time you'd bring up Mikey, it would just be, it never failed. I'm actually surprised that Campia Exposed website hasn't done any of Campia's reactions to you bringing up Mikey Sutton, because those were priceless.
I mean, we never talked about, like, I didn't know if John knew Mikey or even knew of Mikey. I'm sure he probably did, maybe, and because we don't, like, John and I talk about what we're going to talk about on the show, but I don't like, it's funny because I don't think I know anybody that I talk to about YouTube with.
Yeah.
Like, because none of my friends are YouTubers, like none of my circle of friends that I work with and stuff, they ask me about YouTube, but they don't watch YouTube and they're not involved in YouTube, and they don't. So it's such a weird thing. Like, people are always asking me these questions about YouTube. My friends think it's crazy that I'm on YouTube. They're just like, what is this YouTube business? And I'm like, it's like being at a science fiction convention.
Yeah.
But 24 hours a day.
24 hours a day. and with Mikey, that's how it always felt. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I would get excited every time I would see Mikey come out on, because you would never know on any stream, like particularly with the stuff that Sil and Mikey were doing together. You would never know what Mikey was going to come out and say. You were never going to know what he was going to, what scoops he was going to do, what bombs he was going to drop. You just had no idea. Mikey was always there for the showmanship and I'm going to surprise the audience. I'm going to drop this. They're going to be shocked when they hear this. And Mikey was a master at that. It was brilliant. And he used to do this thing to a bunch of us, where what he would do was, before he wouldn't drop the bomb. If it was something that he knew everybody would want to really know about, he wouldn't drop the bomb on the actual show. What he would do is he would be live reactions only, and he would send each of us a DM of what the actual scoop was, to see how we would react. And I love that about Mikey. He cared about the reactions of us, of what we thought of the different things that, of the scoops and stuff. And he would be like, oh, by the way, Zod, there's this. And then he would type it, and it would just be mind blowing. And he would do that regularly because he loved bringing joy to his friends. He loved bringing joy to the audience, getting those reactions in real time. It was beautiful, man.
Yeah.
El Necron says, get this, before my dad passed, he was talking about my mom being in the room. She had already passed. He wanted Jell-O. We told him he couldn't eat it right now. He said my mom would go and get it for me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that is wow. But that goes into what we were talking about subconscious, and about, nobody knows what that really is, what consciousness really is, what it's actually about. We have, let's see here, we had a special chat that I wanted to get to down here. From Monique Garvey. Hello, I'm Mikey's niece. I love hearing all of the memories. It's comforting to know that his memory is living on. Thank you for sharing. Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Mikey is wonderful. I mean, there's nothing he's like the closest thing you could say to somebody who just loved everybody and was so kind to everyone. Wow. Thank you for being here. Much appreciated.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'm sorry for your family's loss too. I mean, I can't imagine.
Absolutely.
What it's like, especially somebody who's so full of life.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. But on the other hand, it's going to happen to all of us. So it really is about the way you live and how you live, because it is such it's as much part of life as, being born and living. So it's, Star Trek 2, how we deal with death is at least as important as how we deal with life. And it's true. And I think that he lived. He had fun. He always had a smile on his face. If I'm not going to I'm sorry that I won't see or talk to him again, but I am also happy to have known somebody who enjoyed his life.
Absolutely.
Every time I talk to him, and there's not a lot of that these days. I mean, I sometimes feel guilty because I'm having so much fun most of the time. Like, everyone else is like depressed. I get depressed when I watch Star Trek episodes. but new Star Trek episodes. But for the most part, life's pretty good. It'll be over soon enough. So why not enjoy it while we're here?
Exactly. And Mikey excelled in that, and saw, and what I love is, like, this is what makes me think, like, the way he treated all of us. Mikey treated all of us like family. And as far as I'm concerned, Mikey is family. Yeah. So to have somebody from Mikey's family actually here in the chat, seeing how Mikey touched all of our lives, is a very, very beautiful thing. And I'm very, very thankful for that. And so sorry for your loss. So sorry about everything. And Mikey he's definitely loved. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
100%. We are, there is nothing. There's really no other way to say it. He's definitely loved, and he's going to go on being loved. No matter what. I mean, it's his legacy is going to live on through all of us. The Nightwing says, I just rewatched the first stream. I joined a couple of days ago. I said to myself, what the hell was I thinking when I did that? Yeah. Let's see. Okay, Monique says here, thank you for supporting our family. He was the youngest of the siblings. We miss him so much.
Wow.
Much love. I'm just so glad that you're here with us tonight. This is
that's very, very
this is
cool.
a celebration of Mikey's life. Rob and I are truly celebrating Mikey. He's a special guy that will, a one of a kind, for sure.
100%.
One of a kind. He is so wonderful. And oh wow. He's a great human being on a personal level, a creative visionary. His influence spread like wildfire. He touched all of our hearts and inspired us. Absolutely. I mean, it's just when I think about everything that we've done, and I think about the course of how he went from the days of not wanting to really do any kind of streams to straight up becoming a full-time YouTuber. I mean, and make no mistake, he pretty much was a full-time YouTuber. I mean, he was streaming with one person with Sky 5 nights a week. He was streaming with Sil. He was streaming with you and me, Rob. He was streaming with a few other people. He was constantly, and then he still was doing all his creative projects and taking care of his things going on in his personal life.
Right.
I mean, where do you find the time? Sleep doesn't seem like something that would fit in there. Honestly,
who needs sleep?
I mean, I always look at it's like, there's just not time for sleep right now.
Too much to do. I relate to that.
Yeah. Neo7 says Mikey was trying to lift all ships. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I believe Mikey could lift all the ships. I mean, we were every one of us. I mean, I don't know. There was something about Mikey's energy that always felt motivating to me.
Yeah.
If I was feeling down,
no, that's a good way. That's a good way to put it.
About anything, it was, the motivation was there. I remember when remember when you talked to me when I was having my crisis of faith over Pause Not Stopped. And I remember Mikey coming to me in a similar fashion, and saying, no, you gotta follow through with this. You gotta do this. This is something that is being told uniquely from your perspective. You've got to do this. I'll never forget that. Mikey was another one that just like, he knew, and he's like, he knew everybody that he worked with, everybody that he did any kind of content with, that he cared about, that he considered a friend. He researched all of us, Rob. This is how I knew that Mikey wanted to. I knew that we were destined to be streaming with Mikey one day, or he was going to become a great friend. He told me a long time ago. He said, I used to listen to you when you were on internet radio. And I remember you had one show that you did, I believe it was back in 2012, and you interviewed a voice actor about an anime that you were really, really passionate about. And he said that was one of the greatest interviews I'd ever heard. And he said, I always thought of you as one of the best interviewers I've ever heard, period.
Wow.
And he said, and if you don't, and when he told me this, and I knew what he was talking about, what he was referring to, he would have only known this if he really had been following my content.
Right.
If he had really been following me from that long ago, he would know. And he's like, I research everybody that I get to know, everybody that I work with, I make it my business to know them. And he knew you. He was a big fan of you too, Rob. You were not. It wasn't. You weren't just somebody that. That's why he was surprised that you knew of him, because he was such a big fan of you. And this was, this was evident in everything. And it was just kind of like, wow, like this is a guy that will go to great lengths and will research everybody and will get to know stuff about them. And he was the real deal, 100%.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because to me, I guess because I've been involved in fandom and fan circles since I was 10 years old, and to me, the what YouTube has done is over the last 15 years, there's people I would never have known if it wasn't for YouTube, unless I met them at Comic-Con or something, and that's been one of the great things, is meeting like-minded people. And people are always coming after me going, why are you friends with this person? Or why are you friends with that person? Because this person says this and that person says that. And it's hard to explain to people that I've grown up in fan circles, and I've been around all different kinds of fans my whole life. And there are people that I disagree with that say shit that I would never say myself, but I still like them. And a lot of people don't understand that. And I'm like, well, you don't understand. For me, when I was growing up, I didn't have any friends. I had lots of friends. I was really social. I had girlfriends. I dated. I had a great time. But I didn't have friends that loved all this stuff, everything that I'm surrounded by. That I didn't have. I had everything else, but I didn't have people that shared my extreme interest in science fiction, comic books, movies.
This
music.
is why you've been hanging on to all these things that you loved back when you were 5 years old, because because if you didn't have those peers, growing up, you had all that other stuff, but that geek stuff was all put aside. That's why, because it stays with you.
I've told this story before, but my senior year in high school was great. It was party, and it was amazing. And I remember they were showing, it was at the Lewis and Clark Theater. They were showing Star Trek 1, the motion picture, Star Trek 2, and Star Trek 3 in 70 millimeter. This is my senior year. And it was like Saturday night only. And people are like, oh, you're coming over to such and such's party, right? You got to go, right? And I'm like, I'm not going to be there tonight. and people are like, well, why aren't you going to be there? I'm busy. I got this thing I got to do. I wasn't going to tell anybody I'm going to see 3 Star Trek movies in 70 millimeters. Because they would have been okay with it, but they were like, come on. Don't you own all those movies on home video? I'd be like, yes. I have them on VHS, but they're not in 70 millimeter on a giant screen. So, I would go. But I'd go by myself. Now I could go online and be like, hey, I could go online right now, if I was on, like, right now, if there was a midnight show at the Burbank 16 of something and I could get there, I could just go right on the show, dude. And I could be like, hey, anybody want to meet me at such and such Burbank 16? We're going to go see, I don't know, whatever's playing, Blue Beetle at midnight. There'd be 6 people there that we'd go see it.
And there you go.
And then we go to Bob's Big Boy, which is open 24 hours, and go get food and talk till 4 a.m.
Yeah,
I didn't have that.
And that's kind of, and that's kind of how this show was, Robert. Like we had it would be like, right. It kind of felt like that. Like we'd get together and it would be this fantastic gathering. And it always felt like it always kind of had that feeling like we were all coming from somewhere. Like,
oh yeah.
And
it's great.
Monique says here, fun fact, my father and mother introduced him to comic books in 1978. He told me that he had no idea what they were before that.
Wow.
Fun fact. Yeah, I never knew that about
I didn't know that either. I love that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic fact. I'm going to have to put that in the book now. Because now my chapter on Mikey Sutton in the book, because I do have a chapter in the book dedicated to Mikey. It's called the chapter's called Into the Mikey verse. And for those watching for the first time who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm writing a book called Pause Not Stopped, and it's about fandoms. And I actually have a chapter in there dedicated to Mikey, because of the impact that Mikey has made on my life, the impact Mikey's made on all of our lives. And now that chapter is going to be exponentially longer, all things considered. And that fun fact about Mikey is something that is really cool. It really stands out, and it's very, very important in the context of Mikey Sutton. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
I love that.
Mikey set a great example. He is someone to emulate. Absolutely, he set a great example. I loved Scoop Setter so much. I remember when him and Sil first came up with that. Oh yeah, that was awesome. Monique is dropping gems. Absolutely. Chris, the bipolar Jedi, says, as someone who has had disagreements with Mikey and Sil and Sky and Zod and even harsh words at times, I need to say that all that is tribal now. Mikey loved what he did, and I'm very sorry for the loss. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Chris. I appreciate that. A lot of people, but see, this kind of goes into what you were saying, Rob, about how we don't necessarily have to agree on everything, but just because we don't agree on everything doesn't mean we have to hate each other either.
No, well, and I get that a lot. A lot of people, there are people that don't understand because, if somebody's unkind or they're, and here's the thing. I've known people of all different kinds of temperaments in my life.
Yeah.
And I've kind of been of the, like, somebody wrote me you can write me letters on my YouTube show, and if they're highly critical, I love people who write highly critical letters of me. And
especially the Star Trek letters. Like, I'm gonna be honest, I see you taking so much pleasure in reading the letters about people who disagree with you about Star Trek.
Oh, I love it. Well, the idea that anybody would even write to you at all is amazing to me.
Yeah.
That somebody feels strong enough after they've watched your show and they'll sit down and write you a letter. Even if they hate my guts, I really appreciate that somebody has actually taken the time to write me.
Yeah.
Because they watched the show and then they felt strongly enough to, and I feel obligated. Like, sometimes Mike doesn't send me letters that just are illegible. The writing isn't good. It's hard to read. So but for the most part, he knows that I don't necessarily have to see only nice letters. But one of the things, and so I there's a lot of people that I'm friends with, because I like most people. Even if I don't like people, I kind of like them. Like, I'm curious. I'm like, how is this
like, so you have like a people to pizza ratio kind of thing. Even if it's not that great, you still kind of like it.
But I mean, even if somebody's a monumental douchebag,
yeah,
I'm curious about, like, how do you go through life?
Right.
And like, so I'd rather be friends if I find somebody to be totally abhorrent and just an irredeemable. Now, I draw the line if people are truly hateful to other human beings, and people don't understand, like, if you're going to make fun of Rachel Ziegler for talking about Snow White, I'm not going to get mad at you for making fun of Rachel Ziegler because she's a public figure. And if she's going to go out and say something and you're going to respond to what she's saying, like when she's dissing on the original Snow White, that pissed me off because I worked on the original Snow White DVD when it came out for Disney. And if somebody's going to say something stupid, I don't need to defend Rachel Ziegler's honor online. It's not my job to go out and police everybody's opinion about everybody else. I don't know Rachel Ziegler. She's not a friend of mine. Maybe one day I'll know her. Maybe one day I'll work with her and I'll be like more possessive or protective of her. But if somebody's going to come out and say something, she's a public figure. I'm not going to get mad at somebody if I know that in real life, if I'm hanging out with that person and I've talked to that person and I know that they're not a bad person, but they might be horrible to people online. I know that seems like a contradiction in terms, but it's still, for the most part, I think most people, if you got together and met them in person, you would like them. When people are online, you're performing, you're being entertaining, you're saying stuff that's meant to be provocative and that's just the way it is. But I find I'm curious about most people. And in a way, I kind of got that from Mikey. I think that Mikey kind of liked everybody too.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
even if he didn't particularly like you, I still have the feeling that he would give you the time of day. He would spend time talking to you, and he wouldn't be like, "You're a douchebag, dude." Like, I don't think he would ever do that to anybody. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right. And that's what I love. Mikey had like an open heart and had an openness to him that was so, infectiously beautiful. I mean, you would see something like that from him, and you would see his willingness, to reach out to people or to talk to people who, like you said, maybe didn't necessarily agree with him, because there's a lot of people that he associated with that it would be almost head scratching, where you would say, yeah, but Mikey, that this person, is completely counter to everything that you're about. But I agree with you on that. There's a few people that I'm not going to mention them here, but there's a few people that I know I could think of right off the top of my head that I was always like that, with wondered about that with Mikey too. But that just goes to show you that, yeah, Mikey was into people and wanted to know people, and I think that's one of the main reasons why the two of you bonded so closely, among all the 10 million other reasons as well. Like, he had that curiosity about people, and he wanted to see the best in people,
Yeah.
which is also another beautiful thing. And Christopher here says, my mom said she took Uncle Mike to Star Wars in 1977, back when they lived in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Oh, nice fun fact. I think I remember Mikey telling that story
I
on
think he
this
did.
show.
I think he did too. Yes, he did.
Correct. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, those of you that watched, that show religiously, because there were a lot of you who did. But I think I remember Mikey telling that story. Your uncle would tell a gazillion stories on this show, and it was so fun. I mean, because when Mikey would tell the story, you would feel like you were there. You could visualize everything that was happening. Mikey was such a great storyteller. And let's not forget story time with Mikey Sutton. We can't ever
Yeah.
forget story time. Mikey had some great stories, for sure. Chris says he meant to say trivial in his post, not tribal. Okay, that's cool. Totally understood. I just want all of you to know my heart is heavy for you, and I'm very, very sorry that you lost your friend. Appreciate that, Chris. Thank you. Monique says, I just learned that last year. Okay, let's see here. Just trying to get caught up here with the chat, because we're like, it's just fun, going over all this stuff, Rob. Mikey was the ultimate geek, and all geek and nerds should have rocked with Mikey. He was one of us.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's like on the nose. I couldn't have said it better. Yeah.
It's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Mikey's nephew, Christopher. Yep, absolutely. Even though Uncle Mike was known for writing about pop culture and geekdom, I remember when he was a journalism student, he got to interview Alexander Rodriguez when he played for the Seattle Mariners.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talked about I think he talked about that too.
Mikey had an extensive, writing career.
Yeah.
That people forget about. I mean, he really wrote a lot of different things. As I said, I always meant to ask him, because I know he wrote for Tower Records for Pulse, but there was Peaches. There was Peaches Records in Seattle too. And I always wondered if he wrote for Peaches, anything for Peaches, because I used to like Peaches as well. I go to Peaches and Tower.
Is there any way we can look? We'll have to look into that, Rob.
Yeah.
That'll be some decent, factual information that we can utilize a little bit later. And we got a bunch of Mikey's family members here in the chat. I really love this. I appreciate this. This feels so great to have Mikey's actual family in this chat with us tonight. Yeah. Hey, cousin Monique and my bro Chris. Love hearing these story times of great Uncle Mike. Oh yeah, his online presence was full of stories.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's see. My grandmother always told us to be like Mike. Retro Nerd Girl says, shout out to Retro Nerd Girl, by the way. Much love to Retro Nerd Girl. 1978 might have been the same time I was introduced to comics too. It's just connecting now. Yeah, comics. Yeah, he definitely loved. He loved comics. Okay, and Christopher is covering that for us right now. Robert, I don't remember Peaches, but I remember he went to Tower.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and he wrote for the Tower Records. And he went to Tower on Mercer Street in downtown. So in Seattle, there was the University District Tower. There was the Mercer Street Tower, which was like the Seattle headquarters. That was Mecca. And there was Tower Records in Bellevue as well. But it was Tower Records, Mercer Street, that was the place to go. Right by this, right across the street from the Seattle Center. And I went there every week. And
I'm surprised you never. I'm surprised that you and Mikey never bumped into each other at some point during that period. Just hearing the two of you talk about it so vividly, it's so that it was a frequent thing. That was the one thing that always struck me. Maybe you guys did and you didn't realize.
I don't know if we could have been at, like, whether it was Seattle Film Festival. I don't know. For me, the time that I was most active in and around Seattle was 1980 to 88. And then in June of 88, I left Seattle permanently. I still go back because my mom and my sister are there and stuff, but I moved away to go to USC. And I mean, it was such a weird thing. Like, I went to the Evergreen State College in Washington State, and then I got into USC. I picked up all my stuff. I packed everything I owned. 2 weeks after my 21st birthday, I lived in the house I lived in my entire life. My bedroom I'd lived in since I was a week old. And I packed up everything. I put a trailer hitch on my Toyota Celica GTS, hooked up this big, and I left. 2 weeks after I turned 21, 2 weeks after I turned 21, I was out. And it was wild because I'd never, like, I went by myself. Like, when I moved to LA, I'm like, I wonder where I'm going to live. It was so funny. Like, I just drove to LA and I'm thinking, okay, I want to live by Westwood where all the movie theaters are. And I got to find an apartment there, even though I was going to USC. I was living closer to UCLA. But it was but everybody in Seattle that was interested in music and movies went to the same events. So it's probably a good bet that Mikey and I we were always somewhere. If he was there, I got a feeling he was there later in Seattle.
Christopher says he moved to Tacoma in 1988.
Okay, well, yeah. So my aunt and uncle live in Tacoma. Well, they lived in Tacoma, and then my grandfather's furniture store was there. And I mean, maybe I did see him because I was there for the first half of 88. So, I mean, I was there for the film festival, and he probably went to a lot of shows in the Tacoma Dome.
Yeah. He had so many stories. It's like, I'll have to go back and watch some of our old shows though to see if I catch some of these references.
What's really interesting is he was there right as grunge rock began to explode. Right? So Mikey was in Seattle when Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Nirvana all exploded. So he was there at ground zero when the Seattle music scene became one of the epicenters of the world for rock and roll. The transitional point. I left, and that's my one regret, is I wish that I lived in Seattle until about like 93.
You had that regret, and I remember Mikey's regret was not going to a particular Nirvana concert where he might have had the chance to meet Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? That's the story that he told. He told that on this show, by the way. He told that story Yeah. Wow. Wow, man. It's the connective tissue is just incredible between you guys and that whole scene. It's just incredible. Um, Thank you, S. Warrior, for the $4.99 super chat. Mikey had the best subtle, not so subtle drops. Had me playing back videos like I was a DJ. Always appreciated that. Hashtag Mikeyverse. Absolutely. Mikey definitely had us going crazy with some of the drops and stuff he would put out.
And sometimes he dropped not just the knowledge, but the obscure. He'd come
Oh
out with
my
something.
God.
I'd be like, "Wow, dude, that's
Right, like some rare song
yeah." I'm
that
like,
we hadn't heard of in like decades, and
Yeah.
we're sitting here like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, no,
I remember we had like
yeah.
a whole 40-minute discussion on one of our shows talking about everything but the girl, and it was just like, I
Yeah, well, and it's funny because they hadn't released a record. They released a record in April, and they
Yeah.
hadn't put out an album because we talked about that on the show.
It was on Spotify. Yeah, I remember.
And then I bought the Blu-ray because it's a Dolby Atmos mix.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was amazing. So
he always listened to the end. 107.7 FM.
That was it. So yep. And when you went to Seattle, there was only one radio station, and that was it. I mean, there's a bunch of radio stations, but the only radio station to listen to as far as music was concerned was the end. Period. That was it.
Retro
or KISW or whatever.
KISW, okay.
Seattle's best rock.
And Retro Nerd Girl says, "I love these stories." Yeah, we love them too. I mean, the truth is, it's all about stories. It's just like what Rob says at the end of every single one of his Robservations live streams.
Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't have been more true. It couldn't have been more true. It couldn't have been more true on this show, honestly, because we all have stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I go to Seattle, when I was in the 80s, I listened to a radio station called KYYX, and then it became the end. It didn't become the end, but the end was the radio station to listen to, and yeah. That was the only thing to listen to. So, yeah, it's weird to go back. It's funny because so much of my early life was so shaped by Seattle, because when I was 10 years old, in fourth grade, my friend Jeff Swafford, I don't know why. I mean, kids today don't have this, but my friend Jeff Swafford was fanatically interested at 10 years old in public transportation, boats, planes, trains, buses. And Seattle has a really great transit system, the Metro bus system. And both of our dads worked in the same building downtown. And the Seattle bus system was very extensive. And every 3 months, they would come out with these fold-out bus schedules. And Jeff's dad would and they were color-coded. So every 3 months, he would go and there was like, I don't know, 150 different bus routes. This is when Jeff was 10. His dad would bring him home to him, and Jeff would plot out these bus adventures where we would leave at like 6 a.m. And on Saturday, you could buy a full all-day bus pass for 50 cents. And we would take the bus all over the city. We'd go to the locks, the Ballard locks. We'd go to the waterfront. We'd go to the airport, because that way, before pre-9/11, you could go in and just hang out and watch planes land and take off. And we used to go all over the city at 10 years old. I can't even imagine. And Jeff's adventures were so meticulous and planned out. He'd be like, "We've never gone here before," and half the kids' parents are like, Your kids are doing what? And like, yeah, we take the bus. Imagine in your city, wherever you're living right now, imagine if you lived in LA or New York or Chicago, and you were a kid and you went from one side of the city to the next, to the other side in a day. You went everywhere. And we were doing that. That was what Seattle, it was like to live in Seattle. So by the time I could drive, by the time I was 16, I knew every place, every club, every movie theater within a 75-mile radius of Seattle, because we would take adventures and go. It was amazing. And to grow up in Seattle, and Mikey was in a place where he came to Seattle when the city was in a transition, and you literally had it was music that was the epicenter of culture then. For me, it was movies. The 80s was movies, but the 80s, 90s was music when grunge rock exploded. And Mikey was there, man. And he was there reporting and doing things, and it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. I in my own personal canon, I like to believe that you two did cross paths, but you just didn't realize it.
Right.
Even if it was just like you walked by each other at a concert or something, or brushed up against each other or something at a show or a record store or something.
I'm sure. Like, I have a theory. I call it my theory of spheres. Here's the theory. If you're a certain kind of person, like if you like something and you have a certain level of whatever your level of interests are, and you're a person that travels, you're a person that does things, and imagine you're in the center of a sphere, and because of your interest, now if you're somebody who's, if you don't seek out your interests, if you're not an adventurer, you don't travel, this isn't true. But if you're somebody that travels a lot, or somebody that goes to lots of concerts, or you're out and about, because of your interest and because of what you're doing, there's only a certain amount of people in the world that you're going to meet, because you're going to meet all of those same like-minded people that are out traveling in the world. And that's the sphere that you live in. Sphere of influence, call it what you want. So it's a good bet that wherever you are in the world, it doesn't matter where in the world you are. You don't have to be in the United States. It doesn't matter. You invariably will run into somebody. In 2005, I was invited to go to Israel for the first time. And I was the guest of honor at this. I was with Roger Nygaard, who made Trekkies. I showed Free Enterprise. I ran into a friend of mine on the street in Tel Aviv. Just like randomly. Somebody I grew up with.
Wow.
On the streets in Tel Aviv. Like, and imagine if I had come 5 minutes later, I would have missed them. I'm in Tel Aviv. That person didn't know I was in Tel Aviv. I didn't know this person was in Tel Aviv. We're in Tel Aviv. And we ran into each other. When in 1999, we took Free Enterprise to the Cannes Film Festival. And I'd never been to Cannes before. And I was walking down the street, and there was a dude handing out flyers for his movie. And I looked at him and I'm like, I know that dude. And so when I went to Evergreen, there was a guy named Reed Paget. And Reed Paget ended up buying one of the 16 millimeter film cameras from our college. And he disappeared. It was like a mystery. Like, Reed Paget, this guy we went to college with, he fucking just...
He has that kind of name, too, like somebody you would picture disappearing.
He upped and he just vanished. And I'm walking down the street in Cannes, and I'm like, Reed Paget is giving out flyers. He made a documentary called American Passport. He was on the ground in Tiananmen Square during the student uprising in China, and the tanks are coming down, and there's the one defiant student standing in front of the tank. Reed Paget was there filming.
Wow.
And the reason he disappeared was he didn't tell anybody, but he took this camera. This is typical Evergreen State College student. He took this camera and he went around the world for like 2 years. And he went to all these war-torn environments, places where there's uprisings, and he just filmed shit. And he made a documentary about it. And this was in, like, I left Evergreen in 88 and moved here. So this is 11 years later. So I haven't even been at Evergreen, for 11. I haven't seen Reed Paget in 11 years. And I'm like walking down the street in Cannes, and I'm like, I know that dude. And that's what I mean by the spheres. If you're living your life, LIVIN, right, you're out there. It's a good bet that there's there's a certain group of people that are also traveling around the world, that are also seekers, that they go to places, they do things. You'll run into people in the most random places on the other side of the planet. And the odds of that happening are infinitesimally small, but it'll happen. And I think Mikey Sutton was that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Like if I knew who he was, I can guarantee you, I bet we went to certain things in Seattle. I just didn't know him then. So there was no way I would have been able to, oh my God, you're Mikey Sutton. In 25 years, I'm going to read your scoops about the MCU on Facebook.
And a couple years after that, I'll be streaming with you.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. Oh my goodness. Harry wants to know, has Rob seen Blue Beetle yet?
I did. You know what? I liked it. I enjoyed Blue Beetle. Here's the thing. And I don't want to. It was fine. First of all, Ted Kord's my Blue Beetle. And I Justice League, the J.M. DeMatteis and Keith Giffen, the mid 80s Justice League, the comedic Justice League drawn by Kevin Maguire was my jam. And Blue Beetle and Booster Gold in that comic, even like Identity Crisis, the DC series Identity Crisis, it's hardcore, but I loved it. So Jaime Reyes is a good character, but I thought the movie was nicely done. Remember, it was a movie that was done for streaming, and they decided to put more money into it and put it out theatrically. But when I was watching it, I'm really tired of superhero origin stories. Like, we all know what they are. Just get to it. Just jump. Let's just meet these. In every superhero origin story, you have to meet the character and watch them become that character. But it's all the same story. We watched it over the last, and I'm convinced part of the reason of superhero fatigue. Like, I really believe that right now in movie theaters, the superhero genre is dead. I mean, like, it's dead. And it's not because just Flash underperformed or Black Adam or Shazam or the DC movies. The Marvel movies are underperforming too. Now, Guardians 3 was fine because it was part of a trilogy that already started. Spider-Man No Way Home, you had the novelty of it. But other than that, even the Marvel Cinematic Universe, dead. It's dead. They're all dead. And I think Aquaman up until Barbie was the highest grossing Warner Brothers movie ever. Do you think that movie's going to gross how much?
The sequel for Aquaman is going to gross less than Blue Beetle. It's going to do horrible. There's no hype for it at all.
I think that movie, and I love James Wan. I love the first Aquaman. I thought it was goofy. I couldn't believe I was watching this movie. I think no one's going to go.
Yeah, it's
like, I really believe that. Like, here's
really
a movie.
Bad.
The first movie, it could be the greatest movie in the world. And I don't think that's another thing. I really wish I could talk to Mikey right now and ask him about what he thinks about Aquaman. Because I honestly think that Aquaman, I've never seen a genre. I really think that dude. Okay. Who's going to go see the Marvels?
No one.
No one. I mean, I'll go see any science fiction, fantasy, and horror film. And this is another thing I want to ask Mikey about this. I don't think that there's anyone and I'll tell you why nobody wants to see the Marvels. Even watching the trailers, you have no inkling about what this movie's about. And I need a reason. If I'm going to go see a superhero film, I need an intellectual reason. I need some kind of a hook, some kind of interesting idea that makes me want to go see it. And the Marvels, I watched the trailer. I'm like, aside from the fact that these girls are interchanging when they use powers, what story is being told? Tell me a reason why, as an astute viewer of comic book movies, do they have a central dilemma? Like Like, what's really interesting is Monica Rambeau knew Captain Marvel as a child. Her mom was Captain Marvel's Carol Danvers' best friend. Well, now you have Monica Rambeau, who's grown up, and now they have similar powers. In the trailer for the movie, there's never a moment where the two of them interact and say anything about the fact that it's so weird for me to have known you 25 years ago and you're like the same age and I've grown up. Like, they've never even made that connection in the trailer. So they haven't explained to their own audience that Monica Rambeau has a connection to Captain Marvel, a personal connection at all. And when I watch this, do they just think people know that? Like, why would anybody know that? And I watched, I don't know. It's so weird. Mikey would have a lot to say about it, though.
Yeah. And I think we're at a point where it's also, and Mikey has on several streams had a lot to say about these things. I think we're at that point where, yeah, going to see movies now is an investment, and the superhero genre has pruned up. People are tired of getting getting a bad taste in their mouth when they go to see these movies, walking away from it all as being disposable entertainment and it not meaning anything. And I think that's what it is. We're tired of being bamboozled. Every time we go to a superhero movie, we're promised one thing and we get something else. Like, I'll never forget. I went to The Flash. I was promised all these things. I was told by the director, "Oh, the ending, the post-credit scene is going to be great. It's gonna set things up, for the future." And you sit there and you watched it. You waited for the credits to end, and all you got was Aquaman puking in a ditch.
Well, that I don't know why. It's funny because I'll tell you this. I'll admit it. I loved The Flash when I saw it. I saw it at CinemaCon. I thought it felt like watching. It had. I thought it was thoroughly enjoyable. I totally. I loved it when I watched it. I was like, I was so entertained. I was so happy when I walked out of there. When it came out, everybody I know hated it. Everyone.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't one person. And I usually like I don't know, maybe I was just in a good mood that day, but
You might have been, and plus you got to see it at CinemaCon, so you were jazzed.
Well, yeah, but I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And then somebody said something to me recently, and I was like, oh. And so this is what they said. They said, how come in the universe that Michael Keaton's Batman lives in, it does not look like the Anton Furst designed Gotham City from Tim Burton's Batman? That crazy, he's just like living in the mansion that Ben Affleck was living in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice.
And they threw in a few props from Tim Burton's.
Yeah, and I thought, oh my God, because here was the Gotham City. Anton Furst was an incredible production designer. The Gotham City in Tim Burton's Batman is this crazy Gothic cathedral netherworld. It doesn't look like our world. And so in the Flash movie, when you meet Michael Keaton's Batman again, he's not living in that world. And I just thought it never occurred to me, but I'm like, why didn't they do that? Like that's where so you get Michael Keaton as Batman, but not really, because the world they go to, the multiverse, was not his world. It was just a generic.
It was a variant. It wasn't the Michael Keaton. It wasn't the Tim Burton.
Now we know that. But it is the Michael Keaton Bat, because the Batmobile, as it's designed, only works if it's from the Tim Burton universe, because in real life, that's a very impractical car. It can't take corners, So the Batmobile comes from that universe, but the rest of the world isn't that universe. Just the Batmobile is, and the Batwing. I mean, it was a little bit, updated, but still. And it's I don't know. And I want to talk to. I never got to talk to Mikey about this. I'm like, hey,
Yeah, that was probably going to be something that was going to happen on one of our upcoming shows.
Yeah, it was going to be on the next stream.
We had so many ideas for that show. We had so many ideas for that show, Rob, and then we had no ideas for that show. It was just going to be an off the cuff thing forever. Like, it was so perfect. And what made it so great was that it had no structure. And that's what I loved about it. Because it's like, as content creators, we tend to do stuff based on a structure. We tend to have a plan where we're going to talk about this, and this. We're going to dedicate this much time to this, and we're going to interact with the chat, and we're going to do this. But with our Wednesday party show, we just kind of threw all that out the window. Anything conventional was gone. And then when we would start talking about other things, and Mikey would get into story time, it just became an entity among itself. And I really believe, Rob, and I could be completely wrong, and people in the chat, you can correct me on this, but I truly believe that it was something unique.
It was.
Because I don't know about you guys, but everything else that everything that we watch on YouTube is structured in some way or another. And you have, and that was the magic of this show, that there is no structure. It's just whatever we feel like effing talking about. That's all it was. And it was beautiful.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my God. And Socks here says, and I left this up for a reason. I now truly believe that at one time, Mikey and Rob had at least walked past one another years ago before they met later on. I hope that there's some way, Rob, that we can get a hold of that, whatever form, that script for that Seattle music movie that Mikey wants you to direct, and that could somehow come to fruition at some point, and we could have that scene with a young Rob or a young Mikey passing each other at a show or something, like in a, like a little Easter egg for people that know about the real life and what we were doing. I wow. Yeah. That would be dope. Just that scene alone. Like,
I know it would be interesting. I mean, I just still can't. It's hard for me to believe that he's gone.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
I mean, I still hear his voice, in my head.
It's like his presence is still among us, and I could still hear him laughing whenever we joke, whenever we say anything. It's so like he's here with us in spirit. I know he is. I feel it. I believe in it, and he's just. And it's that presence that it's irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And Retro Nerd Girl says Reed sounds like a real cool renegade.
Reed Paget. Yeah. Well, you should look up his movie. As a matter of fact, you know what? I haven't thought about this, but let's see if you can get it anywhere streaming. American Passport movie. 1999. That's a riveting travel odyssey of a 23-year-old Seattle native, Reed Paget, who set out to visit the 7 wonders of the world, but instead found himself capturing. It's on the IMDb. And it's Amerikan, American Passport. It's even on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm looking for a trailer. Is there a trailer for it? I don't know. But
yeah.
Wow, it was on TCM.
And we got Matthew McConaughey in the chat. All right. Yeah.
McConaughey. It's Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey. Yes.
Whoa. Whoa.
And Retro Nerd Girl has her opinion here on the first Aquaman. I think the first Aquaman was lightning in a bottle. That came out at the right time. Aquaman 2 is in trouble. Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
By the way, American Passport is on Apple TV.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have to seek it out now.
And there's even a trailer for it.
Excellent.
Oh, you got to watch. Wow, this trailer. I haven't thought about this since like 1999. when you see Reed Paget, you'll see why I would recognize him. So,
oh my goodness! Here, let's see what Retro Nerd Girl has to say here. The Marvels look like another Disney movie made by the numbers, checking off points. Kids may like it. I think it was made for little girls, to be honest.
yeah, I mean,
I was getting like Sailor Moon kind of vibe, Sailor Moonish kind of stuff, with the girls switching. I don't know. But
well, I mean, the funny thing about it is, I mean, Carol Danvers, one of my favorite comics of all time is Avengers Annual 10. And it's the introduction of Rogue from the X-Men.
Yeah.
Rogue's with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and she attacks Carol Danvers and takes her powers. And it was written by Chris Claremont, and it was drawn by Michael Golden, who later went on to draw the Nam and also Micronauts. It's incredible. It's an incredible comic book. And I'm like, where's that story? Like, if you got the X-Men now, why not introduce Rogue and have her steal Carol Danvers' powers, throw Carol Danvers off a bridge, and introduce the mutants that way? I mean, do something. But the Marvels, I watched that trailer and I'm like, why am I watching this? What does this movie have to tell me that I don't know? What's interesting about it? And I have to tell you, I go back and I watch Endgame and Infinity War and Endgame. I love those movies. I could watch Infinity War. That movie is wildly entertaining. I love everything about that movie. And I'm like, Man of Steel. I love Man of Steel. The only thing that I don't love about Man of Steel is that Jonathan Kent gives up his own life and Superman should have saved him. But I get it. But other than that, I love Man of Steel. And I want to see a movie like that again.
Yeah, well, and that this is, Mikey, one thing that Mikey was really, really super jazzed about is Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon.
Oh, yeah.
That looks like it's going to redefine science fiction fantasy, the Star Wars. I think it's going to be a place of refuge for people that are fed up with where Star Wars took things. And now you're going to get something, you're going to get a fresh take, you're going to get a fresh universe, you're going to get something that people are going to be able to be invested in from the beginning.
By the way, this came out this week. This is the absolute version of a Superman for All Seasons.
Ah, yes. Great story.
This is one of my favorite Superman stories. By the way, this is why I love Absolute Editions. I want to get buried with this. This has a cloth slipcase. And the cover, look at this cover.
That's beautiful.
It is absolutely stunning. The printing in this is, look at these Luthor panels when Luthor's being shaved here.
Yes.
I mean, I love this comic so much. And to me, I think that James Gunn, he's using this to define the tone of what he's doing for the DC universe.
Well, we could only hope, because when he compared, when he made that reference from when talking about Superman Legacy, and he made that reference to the 40-year-old version, I think he turned off an awful lot of people. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't think that was a very good direction to go in, especially when this is the guy that directed Human Z. Okay, and you're talking about 40-year-old virgin in relation to Superman. That doesn't compute well with a lot of people. I think that's kind of a bad direction to go in, especially when you're. I had this argument with some people on Twitter X, Rob, about Blue Beetle. There's a whole bunch of people that are supposed James Gunn fans and James Gunn supporters who believe that don't support James Gunn, that don't see any of his movies, that don't pay to see the movies in the theaters, and are totally writing off Blue Beetle, in spite of the fact that James Gunn himself came out and said Blue Beetle is the first DCU character.
Yeah,
and my problem is, if you're going to attack people like myself who don't like James Gunn or don't agree with James Gunn and don't agree with the direction that he's taking things, if you're going to attack people like me and you don't support his movies financially, you don't go see these movies, and you're using excuses saying, well, Blue Beetle came from Walter Hamada and doesn't count for the DCU. You're using that as an excuse. You're not going to see the movie. What people are forgetting, Rob, is that James Gunn isn't just a filmmaker anymore. He's head of the studio now.
He's head of the studio.
So these movies count. When James Gunn comes out and promotes something, and he tells us straight out, Blue Beetle is the first character, right? Then that means that character is going to carry over into the greater DCU, whatever he's doing. And that means if you're a fan of James Gunn, you support his vision, and you want to, and you care about what he's doing, you should be supporting that. But if you're not supporting that, I think I don't think that bodes well for, Superman Legacy, because people that are fed up with superhero movies right now as a whole are fed up with the genre, like the stuff that you were pointing out earlier. People that are fed up with that are not going to somehow miraculously be interested based on the way Gunn is handling things and based on the way people are responding to Gunn. I think Gunn has created a sense of brand confusion with DC that's going to be very, very hard to unravel by 2025 in time for Superman Legacy to come out, because we both know that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is the next DC movie up, and we know that movie's going to flop. We just talked about that. So the next thing over is going to be Superman Legacy, and I don't think there's enough time between now and Superman Legacy for Gunn to win over the general audience or to win over people who are not supportive of Gunn, like myself. I think that ship has sailed, and I don't think he has a chance to win it back, especially, and he's not doing himself any favors by the stuff that he says online either. So I'm kind of, and again, I watched, his little thing that he did back in 2008 when he did his Humanzi, okay, and him and his buddy are peeing on Sean Gunn in a box. I'm kind of at the point where this is not the guy that I want to see anywhere near Superman. And then just when I thought maybe I might have been speaking a little bit out of turn, he compares it to the 40-year-old virgin, and I was like, oh my God. I was done. I was like, that's there we are.
Hang on a second. I gotta see if I can
get
this. No, I want to. Oh, here. Hang on one second. I'm gonna grab something.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
All right. And so with that, we'll wait for Rob to come back with that, and then in a little short while, we're going to be opening up. We'll open up the. We're going to open up the panel here a little bit for anybody that would like to come on and share some thoughts about Mikey and join us for tonight's Wednesday weekly late night party. So we're going to be opening that up in a little bit here. Integrity 101 says James Gunn sucks and this direction is idiotic. Sin Havoc says if you watch James Gunn's DCU presentation earlier this year, he said that Shazam was the beginning of his DCU. Well, the man changes his mind a lot. Looking at everything James Gunn has made, I don't see how anyone has high hopes for him doing a good Superman film. He could barely make one decent Guardians film out of 3. And we got that. Those are some comments there. And Rob, I think, has returned.
I've returned. I have something to show you.
Okay.
This is a novel, a hardcover novel by James Gunn. A lot of people don't know that he's a novelist. Now, this novel, let me actually get the actual by the way, this is in mint condition, I'm just saying. Not that you'd expect anything less of me.
No, not at all. It's like immaculate condition.
This book was written in 2000. And let me just read you the first page of this book.
Okay.
Is the first chapter is called "The Greatest Toy in the World." Number 1, we acquire the toy. His real name was Trevor Forrester, but the kids in the subdivision called him Monster because he was mean, and he was ugly, and he was retarded. You ought to be able to make that brat's head spin in circles, smart as you are, my father would say to my brother and me. But IQs didn't help much when Monster pushed down on your chest and squeezed your scrotum until you screamed. At night, we'd put ice packs between our legs to stop the swelling. We wouldn't tell our mom. Didn't want her poking around our private stuff. The old man, we didn't tell much of anything. A good thing about Monster was that he was choosy. His father was a proctologist. He made a lot of money. And every year at Christmas, he'd buy his kid too many gifts. Monster would pick 1 or 2 toys out of which he was fond and ignore the rest. He loved the $6 Million Man action figure, whom he called Steve and treasured as a sort of friend. There was a funny story about how one day Mr. Forrester was drunk on the couch and Monster was running Steve over his sleeping body. And Mr. Forrester woke up, fed up, and smashed Steve to bits on an ebony statuette of the Virgin Mary. Monster stood by, yelling, "Steve, no, 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 Steve!" That's the first 3 paragraphs of this novel. I can just tell you, this book is hilarious and dark, and it's like nothing you've ever expected that came from James Gunn. And most people don't know he's a novelist. And I would say this. I've worked with James. I've known James. I mean, I first worked with him in end of 1998. And he always struck me as somebody who could adapt and probably do anything. And I think that James Gunn's Superman is going to be like this. And it's going to be different. It's not going to be as operatic and godlike like what Zack Snyder did. It's not going to be like Richard Donner's Superman. It's going to be more like this. And I don't know if I can explain what I mean by that, but it's going to be more Superman for all seasons.
Look, I love Superman for all seasons. So if it turns out that you're right and it ends up being like Superman for all seasons, I will come out here and admit that I was wrong. On the next,
I know you will.
On the next one that we do, I will say to you, yes, I was wrong about that Superman, because Superman for all seasons is a great story, but nothing that James Gunn has done as a filmmaker convinces me that he's the guy for Superman. I totally get his Marvel stuff, because I feel like Marvel is his wheelhouse. And even that Toy Collector, the book that you've started reading right now, gave me vibes of the kinds of things that he would do in the MCU, some of his other films that he's made in the past, maybe. But I don't really get anything from him as a filmmaker, from his collective filmography, that makes me believe that he is the right guy for Superman. I think Superman is DC is a different approach from Marvel, and you can't apply the Marvel formula to DC and expect it to flourish. And that's always been my issue with the idea of, oh, just bring the Marvel guys over to DC and they'll be able to flip DC. Well, no, because they're not fundamentally understanding that DC comes from a different place than Marvel. DC's characters are different from Marvel's characters. If all these archetypes were the same, I could see that it would be interchangeable. But because Marvel and DC are supposed to be two distinct brands and have two distinct flavors, I don't ever think that they've ever been really successful copying off of each other. I've never seen I could never look at any, and they're making incidentally, they're finally going to do an adaptation in an animated version of Watchmen next year, which is probably something that they should have did a long time ago. An animated Watchmen movie, I think Watchmen would work as animation, and it could translate into animation. And this is me.
But do you think that they could make could they make a 2-hour Watchmen movie?
They probably won't be able to make it 2 hours. They'll probably have to be a little longer.
Yeah, I'm perplexed by this, because I think as much as, especially, I thought that Zack Snyder did a very respectable job adapting Watchmen. But my question is, why do an animated, like they did a motion comic where they did a motion comic of all 12 issues of Watchmen?
Yeah, that was on the Blu-ray of the Blu-ray box set for the for the movie. Yeah,
they released as a single thing too, and I'm like, what? I mean, they keep going back to that well, and I don't understand why. Well, I actually do understand why. It's one of their most successful comics ever published. And they need to, if they don't keep putting out new Watchmen stuff, the copyright reverts back to Alan Moore, and DC can't do anything with it anymore. So they have to keep making Watchmen stuff,
pumping it out, and there's only so much they can do.
I know. It's funny. I just finished reading the absolute version of Doomsday Clock, which I read the comic when it was coming out, and I just Jeff Johns is not Alan Moore, and I understand what he's trying to do, and there's some interesting stuff in it, but it's no Watchmen.
Yeah, absolutely not. No Watchmen, not even close. And I just think the amount of overconfidence you'd have to have in yourself as a creator to think that you could make something on par with Watchmen, and then not even, and then when you actually read the book, you're thinking, what was he thinking about? What is he trying to do here? It's so average and sort of generic in a lot of ways. It was cookie cutter. I was to the point when I read Doomsday Clock, you know what I thought was better? Some of those before Watchmen comics that came out were better than what he did, especially the one about the Minutemen.
Oh yeah,
my God.
The thing is, look, I sort of like Jeff Johns. He's not a great intellect. I think he's a great. I loved his Green Lantern. I liked a lot of his Justice Society of America stuff. I mean, I have a lot of Jeff Johns on my shelves up here, but I don't think Doomsday Clock. I understand what he was trying to do, and ultimately, there's some stuff that's sort of clever. But anyone who's trying to follow up Alan Moore, unfortunately they don't have the mind of Alan Moore, so they can't come near him.
Yeah, but the only way you can follow up Alan Moore is if you get Alan Moore.
Yeah, I'll tell you something though about. I'm going to give you a theory.
Okay.
I don't know if this Superman movie is going to happen.
I don't think it is.
As a matter of fact, I don't think after Black Adam, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, Blue Beetle, Flash, and Aquaman, 5 movies that have collectively are going to lose
Billions.
$1 billion. I mean, and I take no pleasure in this. I don't like when movies lose money. I don't like when science fiction, fantasy, and horror, much less comic book movies, lose money. But with how much money Warner Brothers Discovery is in debt, if you have 5 movies in a row that are all superhero films that fail at the box office, how do you justify making another one? I don't care who you have making them. I don't care if it's Superman or not. How do you justify that to your shareholders?
That's what I want to know. And that's why I was, when I was arguing what I was trying to argue with all these James Gunn, these alleged James Gunn supporters on
Neo
Twitter.
7's right. I didn't include Birds of Prey. That's another one.
Yeah. Yeah. So many of them. So many of them.
And that's the thing. They've all lost. They lost substantial amounts of money. And I mean, Flash was a disaster in terms of, and people aren't even looking at it like, oh, okay, but it's a disaster. I mean, Black Adam with The Rock. Again, Black Adam
has the highest box office total of all those movies you mentioned.
Yeah, I know.
Black Adam is the one that was at the very least could have been used as a turning point to turn the corner. I believe that if they would have went with what was set in motion. So if after Black Adam you ended up getting, for example, Man of Steel 2, I think that could have turned things around.
I do too. It baffles me why they didn't make a movie called Superman. That was the sequel, not Man of Steel 2. There was Superman the movie.
Yeah.
But that was in 1978. If they had made the Man of Steel, because he's a man, but he wasn't Superman yet, the Man of Steel and Kal-El's battle with Zod was the crucible that forged Superman.
Yep.
And I'll tell you something. It was the killing of Zod in that movie that made the Man of Steel into the Superman that he became. And that's why Superman doesn't kill.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he carries the guilt with him of the killing of Zod.
Yep.
And the destruction of the last remnants of his people.
Exactly.
And that's why, I really love Man of Steel, the whole battle. And I have to say, one of the most brilliant, I was talking about this earlier today. I was talking about this. I thought when I first saw Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, the opening of that movie that replays the end of Man of Steel from Bruce Wayne's point of view is one of the most genius things ever. And you see, because everyone doubted Ben Affleck, seeing him in that beautiful tailored 3-piece suit running into the destruction of Metropolis. He lands, he goes in looking all dapper and running in without a care in the world. He's going to save whoever he can save. He's trying to save his people and tries to save the girl from this. The destruction, you see it in Affleck's eyes. You see that he can't even fathom the destruction that he's witnessing. Because in the modern age, we've never seen that kind of destruction. Skyscrapers, I know it's 9/11 imagery, but when that last shot when the camera's pulling up and he's looking up to the sky and you see the rage, you see the whole, it sets up the whole, this guy's got to go. This alien has got to go. And it was, I love that so much. I was like, that opening scene, it might be my favorite opening of any superhero movie ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's so great about
because he's the most Batman he's ever been. Like when he puts on the mask and can growl and all that. But watching Bruce Wayne as Bruce Wayne run into that mayhem, that's the most stone cold Batman shit you can do.
Yeah. Here you go.
He doesn't need his mask. He doesn't need his cape. He's in a 3-piece suit. He's got his Bruce Wayne persona, but his Bruce Wayne would never run in there. Bruce Wayne, the playboy, because Bruce Wayne is Clark Kent. It's a mask. He's Batman is really Batman. His alter ego is not really him, but that was Bruce Wayne as bad. That was Batman as Bruce Wayne running in, and that was Batman without his armor, without his cape, and even though he's dressed as Bruce Wayne, that was effing Batman.
That's right.
And it was badass.
Have you seen how fan editors have taken it and have matched up the footage, have like matched up the where it's seamless, where you can
I love that. It's so great because that superhero battle is the greatest superhero battle ever. Yeah. The battle between Zod and Superman, because it shows what Kryptonians, the horror of what would actually happen if two Kryptonians were battling. And what's interesting is, you know, The Boys has touched on it. I don't think that they could have made The Boys TV series. I know the comic existed, but until Zack Snyder showed the actual horror of two Kryptonians slugging it out in an American metropolis, we would never know what kind of horrible carnage there is. And that's another thing that's really always bothered me about Man of Steel. People are like, oh, the Superman would protect innocent people. I'm like, that guy's not Superman yet. He doesn't know what's going on. He's been Superman for a week. And he's the kind of destruction, the apocalyptic situation that poor Kal-El finds himself in at the end of Man of Steel is insane. And the fact that he survived the end of that movie and Zod didn't kill him, that's what makes him Superman. That's what changes his worldview. That's when he realizes that what he believes in, truth, justice, and the American way, if he didn't kill Zod, he never would have become Superman, because he saved the world. He saved not just one person, he saved 8 billion people.
Billions, yes.
And what are you going to do? Put Zod in jail?
No, and what he's not going to eventually get out. Like it's
and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's what people are always like, well, Superman doesn't kill. You're right, he doesn't. And he doesn't in that movie either, because he's not Superman yet. And if he was, they would have called the movie Superman. That's what the second movie should have been called. And why they never made that movie? And I'm convinced if they had made a Superman movie after Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice and then made Justice League, everything would have been very different. Because that Superman movie after Dawn of Justice would have made $1 billion.
Absolutely. Yeah, it would have set the tone. And I still think that they could have went in that direction after Black Adam, when they went through all that trouble to tout out Henry Cavill being back as Superman. They could have went in that direction.
Well, I mean, the real problem, and it's hard for people to get this, the people that work at the studios now are corporate hires. And corporations, they don't think, okay, well, a movie company is different than, say, Coca-Cola, that's different than a bank or whatever. So the people that are working at the studios really don't know. First of all, James Gunn and Peter Safran running a studio, they're some of the only people that have ever made movies that are running a studio. So in a way, they're very different than anyone else who's run. Walter Hamada, before that whole group of people, they're Ivy League educated business guys, and they're running a company. They don't know how to make movies. They don't know anything about this. And so that's the real problem that's hamstrung so many of these studios. Like, look, Kathleen Kennedy is an incredible producer who produced your childhood. She's been producing incredible films for 40 years. And she took a job because George Lucas wanted her to. But you can't blame Kathleen Kennedy. I'm not a fan of what I'm seeing from Ahsoka, and she has nothing to do with it. Dave Filoni and all of the people that he controls, if there's any TV show, any Star Wars show that Dave Filoni can do whatever he wants, it would be Ahsoka. All Dave Filoni has ever directed are episodes of The Mandalorian. He doesn't know how to make live action material. He's good at animation, but the first 3 episodes of Ahsoka, I'm watching them going, what is this about? Like, tell me the story of what's happening in Ahsoka. Don't tell me the plot. Because Star Wars, remember, George Lucas based Star Wars on Kurosawa. He's like the Hidden Fortress, samurai movies. And if you think about Star Wars, I'll give you in a quick nutshell what's wrong with Star Wars. Quickly, modern day. The original movie, Star Wars, is about a farmer and a truck driver. We all know people like that. Luke's a farm boy. Han Solo's a truck driver. He runs moonshine across state lines. We know those characters. We sympathize, empathize. We understand them. When Luke Skywalker is staring at the twin setting suns of Tatooine, he's us. He's all of us. All of us have wondered, oh, God, I got to go to college. Like, what am I going to do? My friends are gone. I'm stuck at home. Everybody understood Luke Skywalker at that moment. John Williams' French horn. No, 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 no. We get it. Because we have all been there. And then you meet the cool guy who rides the motorcycle, or Han Solo is Smokey. He's Burt Reynolds driving a black Trans Am. That's who Han Solo is. We get it. We know who he is. He's like that cool dude that probably had cigarettes in his pocket or whatever. And we all get it. We know those people because they're us. And Ben Kenobi is like, your uncle who's a veteran of foreign wars. He's the guy, let me tell you about Vietnam. So that's what those characters like. They were us. So that's why Star Wars was so appealing, because we know those people. And if they weren't us, then they were people we knew.
Exactly.
Now, when you're watching Star Wars, you're watching all of these characters that are only Star Wars characters. They're not analogous to us. Nobody knows Ahsoka. Nobody knows Sabine Wren. They're people you don't look at any of those characters and think, oh, I know somebody who's just like her. Because they're only Star Wars characters. And that's the problem. Star Wars was about people like us. Now Star Wars is about people that live in the Star Wars universe. And there's nobody to identify with. There's nobody you can look at and go, I get Luke Skywalker. I mean, you look at Ahsoka, the reason you know Ahsoka is because she's an animated character. She was never somebody that you knew. She was never somebody that you identified with. Even, you look at Owen Lars and you look at Aunt Beru and you look at the conversation they have with Luke in Star Wars. We've all been there. We've all had that conversation. Everybody, girl, boy, they, them, whomever. We all know that conversation. Sitting around a table with your parents, your aunts, your uncles. It's just for one more season.
Yeah,
just
right.
Stick around.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, like the stifling of your destiny, or the pause of your destiny when there's something that you're meant to do or you need to do it, and then there's always that obstacle, or the people in your family telling you not to do it for whatever reason. Yeah, we've all been there, and it's easily relatable, which is why Star Wars is so iconic.
And what's happened is now Star Wars and Star Trek, and to a certain extent, all of these franchises are so far up their own asses that they've forgotten to speak to their audience. There's what character, when you watch Ahsoka, what character am I? What character do I identify with? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that show opened with a New Republic captain of a ship who has a high value prisoner on his ship, and some other ship shows up in a replay, a reverse scene from Return of the Jedi. It's a Jedi code. Okay, the Jedi have been destroyed. Everyone's dead. And now the New Republic's taken over the Empire or whatever. You're going to let somebody with an old Jedi code on your ship? It's bogus. but you do it anyway. And then 2, these characters come off, they kill you and kill all your people. How are you supposed to sit there and go, these people, that Ahsoka opens with an act of dumb people doing dumb things. So how are you supposed to like that show? And then as you watch and then with Ahsoka episode 3, it's like, oh, we're now watching a replay of Empire Strikes Back, Yoda training Luke. We get it all. You open with the replay of I was about to clear them, sir. It's an old code, but it checks out. I mean, we saw that in Jedi. You're just flipping the script, and we've seen it already. It's so frustrating to watch these franchises, like Spock, in Strange New Worlds. They're trying to make Spock like a nerdy sophomore in high school.
Yes,
but he was never. I mean, and it's so ridiculous. Well, he's not the fully formed Spock that we know. Okay, first of all, yeah, he is. That's why he's the science officer on the Enterprise. And the thing about, they make him seem like he's an idiot. His mother, who he was close with, this is what drives me fucking crazy. In a second season episode called Journey to Babel, Spock and his mother have a conversation, and Spock says, look, I chose to follow the Vulcan philosophy. I chose this. And because he chose this, and he's of 2 worlds, he had to be better than every other Vulcan. He had to be the uber Vulcan. But because his mother is human, he has insight into humanity that no other Vulcan has. And if you watch the original series, Leonard Nimoy played this character with a lot of depth. The way they write it now, they don't understand. They don't understand that depth. They need everything to be black and white. Our franchises have been dumbed down. Everything, superhero movies, Star Wars, Star Trek, you name it. Everything has been dumbed down because the people writing these things, they don't read. They haven't read the genre that they're working in. They don't know how to make something. If it's just Star Wars, they don't get that Luke, what his plight was. I mean, he tells you. You see him, he does chores. His friends have gone, and he's doing chores because he feels an obligation to. He could leave whenever he wants, but he feels an obligation to the aunt and uncle who raised him. He's like, I'm obligated. I can't just leave Owen Lars out with nothing. He's my uncle. He raised me. I can't just bail.
Right. Can't just bail, but yeah, I agree with you, man. Everything and the whole Spock thing, it makes no sense. It's like you can't say that he's not that Spock, because he definitely is. There's no question about it. The only thing that saves Strange New Worlds for me, Rob, and I think we talked about this on the last show before, was that we now know that Strange New Worlds takes place
in a different universe. Yeah.
In a different universe. So to me, it's kind of like they're kind of, if they want to make Spock into a horny sophomore high school student, whatever. But that's not our Spock. We don't have to care.
But you know what they've made Spock. Here's the thing that they don't get. Spock on the original Star Trek, the 66 to 69 original series, Spock was cool.
Yeah, he
was the coolest guy on the Enterprise, and he knew. And when he had to give it back to McCoy, and when McCoy and Kirk were ribbing him or something, Spock would have the zinger of an insult back because he understood how to play. He's a smart guy. He understood humor, and now they've turned Spock into a nerd. And not only that, he's like a nerd that like gets the girl. You actually have Spock singing songs about, oh, I missed my poor love, Christine Chapel.
Like okay. So let's since you mentioned that, I want to briefly touch on that with you, just as as mutual Star Trek fans here. Okay? Oh man. The basically what I like to call the Glee in Space, the Glee in Space episode. I don't know what it was, man, but I was like my nerves. I was like watching that episode and I was seething. Like I started sweating. Like when they started singing, I was like, "Oh my god, what are they doing? What is happening here? What where are we going with this?" And I just think it was an excuse to sell an album because it's like I don't know what other purpose it served. I was just so like
But here's the thing that I was looking forward to. I'm like, okay, if you're going to do a musical episode, like we have an episode in Next Generation called Darmok,
yeah.
where, his eyes wide or his arms spread wide. And the idea is that Picard meets Captain Dathon, whose race speaks in metaphor.
Yeah,
Well, what if there was some alien race that spoke in song, and the Enterprise crew had to adapt and figure out, okay, we have to come up with music to communicate with them. Like, give me an interesting science fiction story within that. Buffy did. When Buffy did Once More with Feeling, there was actually a really interesting story happening. And those characters, because it's Buffy, the thing about Buffy was about high school. Even though, there's the Hellmouth and all that, but it was still about high school, interpersonal relationships in high school. All the people that write for TV now, like Strange New Worlds, they all grew up watching Buffy. They think Buffy is the end-all, be-all. But they haven't read any science fiction. So Star Trek is a science fiction show that has no science fiction in it. But what it does have is high school interpersonal relationships. Not adult interpersonal relationships. High school interpersonal relationships. I'm going away for the summer to Vulcan to do my internship. Oh my God, Christine, you're going to leave me alone? What, are you kidding me? It's the 23rd century. You can go wherever you want. And you're going to lament the loss of your girlfriend who's coming back later? First of all, why are you banging girls at work?
That's number one. Yeah.
Spock would never do that, because logically, if you're involved with people on your ship, you are compromising the safety of your crew because you're putting the needs of the one over the needs of the many. Spock would never do that.
No. Yeah, you're right.
It's terrible.
It's terrible. And the musical episode was just all over the place too. I was trying to figure out where they were going with it, and it was literal torture at that point. I was like,
terrible.
My God, what are we looking at here? Wow. Spock was funny as hell. The back and forth between him and McCoy, priceless. Yeah. The original.
Yeah, and because it was written by people who were adults that had adult experiences. Like, oh, I don't know, we were in World War II or Korea. And it was not so great.
Retro Nerd Girl says, "Yep, Spock has a very delicious way of taking care of any people who were poking fun at him, and had everyone in stitches. The original series Spock rules." Yeah, he understood humor. That's for sure.
Because he had a human mother,
yep.
And that was the whole thing. He had more insight into humanity than any other Vulcan because of his human mother. And that's why he was able to give as well as he could receive. And he understood all this. In this show that they've and here's what I don't like. So much of the writing now, it's like, okay, here's your character trait. Our Spock is not he's not as experienced as he will be later. Like what, in 4 or 5 years? How different were you 4 and 5 years ago? Unless you go through something like, oh, I don't know, high school. Spock is in high school right now. I've got my loves, and then they leave, and I'm going to hook up with, except he's got, like, T'Pring is betrothed. They did an episode of Star Trek about Spock's mother-in-law and him being human. Like, just because you turns human, if you're a vegan, it doesn't matter whether you're a human being or a Vulcan, you're just not going to eat meat. Just because you're in a human body, like, "Nom, nom, nom, I love this bacon. Nom, 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 it's so tasty." Spock would not eat bacon. Physiologically, if you're a human being, you don't have a bacon urge. If you've never had bacon before, it's not like just because you're a human being, we're not genetically hardwired to love bacon.
Yeah.
Spock's not going to go and eat bacon because he's a vegan. And yet in the show, it's like, well, he's human now, so he's nom, 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 nom. I'm going to eat bacon. That was the dumbest shit ever.
And Retro Nerd Girl makes a great point here. I can't deal with the cursing either. Humans never evolved. Well, they went backwards in Strange New Worlds of Discovery.
Well, the funny thing about it is like in Star Trek in the 60s, they didn't swear because it was for television standards and practices. And whenever you hear, like, if you hear a bad word, if they say the F word in Star Trek, it sounds out of place because the characters in the Star Trek universe don't speak that way. And that's why Nicholas Meyer in Star Trek 4 in his script and Nimoy directing was able to do the whole thing about colorful metaphors. Well, double dumbass on you. Because Kirk doesn't know how to swear. You know, because he doesn't have to swear. Because we don't need to swear anymore. And that was a funny bit. But now everyone says the F word. I mean, Spock goes, "You gotta be," or whatever. He almost says the F word when he turns human. It's so stupid. It's bad writing. It's all bad. All of it's bad writing. It's bad writing by people that don't read, that didn't take writing classes in college, and they don't know enough. That's the problem.
There you go. That sums it up in a nutshell. And I have to say, again, and Mikey Sutton was someone who definitely read, definitely wrote, and definitely understood, and definitely cherished good stories, and definitely, cherished great friends and everything. And we are just blessed right now here to be celebrating Mikey Sutton's life. And I will say, if you can, please donate to the Mikey Sutton GoFundMe fundraiser. I have the link posted in the chat and in the description below for anybody who wants to donate to help Mikey's family.
And yes, I think that's a great point. And another thing about Mikey was not embarrassed or shy about what he loved, and he fiercely loved the imaginative creation of other people, whether it was music, movies, whatever it was. He was a true imagination connoisseur in the sense that he loved the creation of other people. It didn't make him jealous. He reveled in great movies and reveled in great music. When he brought a Filipino band to the United States, it was because he loved the music and wanted to see them become successful. Yes. He loved that. He promoted other people's great work. And that's rare in this day and age. And this was a repeating thing in his life. He never stopped promoting other people's great work. And that's rare today. And I think we need more of that.
We definitely need more of that. So I think it's safe to say that Mikey is going to be with us, with all of us, watching over all of us. It is up to us as Mikey's friends, family, and co-hosts and things to keep his legacy going, to keep things going in a positive direction the way he wanted. And I just feel honored to have known Mikey for the short time that I knew him. I feel like I've known him my whole life.
I agree.
And part of that is the way that he projected himself onto all of us, and the amount of care and love that he showed all of us throughout these years. And I'm excited to continue his legacy and to prop it up and to do everything I can to help make sure that those projects see the light of day it's definitely something
And
that
your own project too.
oh, yeah.
I mean, he was going to get your book, he was going to get your book published. And I think that if one thing is true, like you said earlier, that myself and Mikey both encourage you to continue, I think any creative endeavor is worthy of being finished. So many people live in a world where they started something and didn't finish those things. And I think your book's going to be really interesting and full of your own passion, and you should dedicate it to Mikey. But you got to finish it because that's what he'd want you to do.
Yeah. It's definitely.
And I want to buy it.
Got to be finished. It's definitely got to be finished. And that's the thing. Again, all of these projects are, it's you say, yeah, all these projects are in the works. There's all these things going on. Yeah, and hopefully, through the collective of creative minds that we have here, everything will come to fruition. I believe it will. I said it before. Yeah. I don't think anything will stop Mikey's legacy. I think it's going to be it's going to be awesome. In the future. So with that, I don't know, Rob. How do you think we should wrap this up? I always stuff like this. It's so hard to find a way to kind of.
I think if nothing else, Mikey was a man who followed his passion, and he helped other people realize their dreams too. And when he found somebody that he really liked, he would do anything he could to promote them. And he was very unselfish in that way. And I think what he shows us is that it's great to be passionate about the work of others. And that doesn't in any way diminish your own work. You can still do whatever you want to do, but to fiercely love the work of others at the same time and let other people's work inspire you to do your work is a rare thing. And Mikey had it. And we should all, be like Mikey.
Exactly. We should all be like Mikey. So again, anybody that has the opportunity, anybody that can, please check out the GoFundMe page. Please go to it. The link is in the description. The link will be here. And every live stream that I do from here on out till the conclusion, till that GoFundMe ends, I will have it. I will have the link in the description for you, for anybody who wants to donate, and we'll continue to push this until until it reaches its proper conclusion, because that's definitely the way. And we're going to all continue being positive and continue moving forward. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end tonight's tribute to Mikey Sutton.
This is the way.
This is the way. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, watching the Wednesday Weekly Late Night Party. Robert and I will see you next time. Good night, everybody.
Good night, and thanks for being here.